I'm taking notes on this. So I decided having been through a situation where, I worked at two jobs, one at the very beginning of my professional working career prior to being a professional musician for, full-time. I became, and a professional, small businesswoman who owns a DJ company. Before I had both those businesses were more profitable, and before I had to switch careers into that, I was working as first a receptionist and then an inter-office communication specialist who helped surgeons and device manufacturers in orthopedics medicine to communicate better with the outside world so they could serve more patients and do more research to create better implants. Also helping sales, testing, and helping surgeons to consult with the manufacturers of orthopedic devices so they could have better outcomes for when the people who probably benefited the most were engineers creating new designs for new implants and improving old ones, as well as the surgeons who worked for the device manufacturers who to help, and then finally started working directly with hospitals to allow them to serve more patients and to serve patients in a better manner with less complaints. We went from like 5,000 a month to 7,000, and I went from helping a staff of 300 to a staff of 500. But when I left, it had a lot to do with they lost 30% of their stock, publicly traded stock, almost overnight. It took about a week, but it never rebounded until I was replaced with 16 people, and 10 of those quit. Eventually, they had to replace my one position with 6 people, 3 who trained me and 3 that I had some experience training with after I became hired. So the thing that I was thinking based on what my experiences were, and this is all after I turned down a 4-year scholarship to medical school because I was 8 months pregnant, and they did say there would be no way I could have childcare. So, I've had a lot of experience with different aspects of medicine after I didn't go to didn't go to medical school. But now that I'm looking to go to law school, trying to find a way to cover that cost that I can't cover with scholarships and loans that can be paid back, it's a matter of thinking what is the best way to help work smarter, not harder, and still be able to go to law school, get a master's degree, and then get a PhD to become a professor. And because I had the terrifying experience of stopping 2 mass shootings. That means the first one was when my son was only 6 months old, maybe 5 or 6 months old as a baby. I'd just gotten a temporary job that became permanent only within the last 2 weeks of this incident. And a guy had just gotten fired, and he was the youngest tech on that company's, that regularly called through for dispatching. He was a service technician who'd been fired what I believe is probably alcohol, drug use, and he was just going through some depression, and he was late a lot and having some inconsistencies. So they fired the guy, and he comes up there, with a gun and calls and says he's going to shoot up everything. And I talked him down, and I'd say, I wish that I could say it was just the 5 minutes we spoke. But when it happened again in Florida, that company had about 42, maybe 45 people there that day. And I was the first person at the door that would have been impacted. But because of the relationship I'd already built with the guy, he stopped. And he took my advice that said, okay, please stop. If you can stop this now, you're going to be a whole lot better off than what you're planning. But I think I told him something that if you've got don't make a temporary situation into a permanent solution, into a permanent ending to your life and everyone else's. Think about this situation is temporary. You lost your job, but you can get another one. But you can't turn back from any of this. And he listened, and he said, okay, I won't do this. I said, well, they're going to, if you don't want to get this to continue to get worse, then go sit out in the car and put your gun in the dashboard inside your glove box and just sit with your hands outside the vehicle and wait till the cops arrive so you don't have to get beaten or anything, He didn't even need to hear that. He just said, okay. And I said, just wait and don't get out of the car until they tell you to. And you're going to be a lot better off. We all are. So, and he just, they arrived maybe 2 to 5 minutes later. And the next time, though, there were 300 employees in that building, if everyone was even at work that day. and an employee had had a breakup who worked they had a girlfriend of the employee who worked upstairs, and I worked at the front door again. But she had a lot more ammunition. She had a lot more anger, but she also knew me better than the other employee. We had much more experience. Hadn't been there 2 weeks. I'd been there probably about 6 months at the time. But still, the situation was extremely dangerous, and I'm the first person to have to deal with it. And I hear about every day on the news now, for the last few years, it's just gotten really bad, especially since 2011. I'd say it's just seen all the news too much. And then it's every day, and these are really happening just more and more. But having managed to stop 2, I realized, and having seen the benefit of conflict mediation in high school and in junior high, I actually benefited as well, but changed the lives of a lot of people who were destined to get expelled from school, destined to go have their lives completely altered, and a lot of those people do tend to end up in the prison system. So there's a lot of things you can save a lot of lives with conflict mediation, but I saw that day that you could literally change history for yourself and a lot of other people. So I said, well, what made it possible? And then I started thinking about conflict, mediation prior to that, learning that in high school. And you basically learn how to be a negotiator for your peers, for the kids your age. And then it started in junior high. But they cut that program, I believe, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I left the state the day before Schwarzenegger was the election. And I think a week later I heard that Arnold Schwarzenegger had become the governor. This is the week I moved to the deep south of Florida, Florida swamp area. So I didn't come back. I moved from there to 5-6 years later with my then husband to the northeast coast, where Philadelphia, and stayed out there for at least probably about 6-7 years, maybe even 8 years, and then came back to California and seen a lot of things change. Graduation rates when I got here in 2012 were 6 out of 10 people were graduating, and the city that was really a huge. Everybody had a great job. There was a lot of opportunities. There was a lot of problems with. I felt like people my age and in my ethnicity and my ethnic background and my community too many of them were getting sent to jail from an early age and not able to seem to get out of that system. There was a really high homicide rate. Stockton, California, was only an hour away from my hometown, Sacramento, had the highest murder rate numerous times through the 80s and 90s. It was the highest murder rate in the country. But when you compare that with places like Philadelphia, Camden, and New York and Baltimore, I just saw that there was a lot more opportunity before I left California than when I got back. After the housing crisis, turning back to the East Coast in 2012, it was like it looked like a bomb had gone off in my city. Like everything was boarded up. There was almost no jobs, it seemed like, compared to what we had before. Whereas it seemed like people were spending more money, but they're getting less in return. And there was less upward mobility. So if you start out here, back in the old days, I remember people could go and work their way up pretty quick to a higher wage, a better opportunity, more education. When I got back, it definitely seemed like it had gotten a lot harder to get ahead and a lot harder to stay ahead. And then on the same time, there were so many traps. It seemed like everywhere you slip, you fall over a law and end up in the system. You fall over a trap, and you end up in this situation or that situation where you can't get out. And I remember when I left, they had zero tolerance policies instituted at a lot of the high schools that resulted in a lot of expulsions, which is where Conflict Mediator got the funding. When they saw, well, what if there's, in the 90s when I was studying those programs and working in high schools and in junior highs, to stop kids from getting kicked out of school and to stop violence. That's what was the beginning, was stop the fights or make the fights not have to keep going. And then these kids can stay in school, and we also stop a lot of the violence or at least a lot of violence from escalating. Because someone might get in a fight, that gets you pulled into mediation. Or they might be like, someone hits someone and they stop it and say, you go to mediation or you're out of school. What do you want? But I remember the crazy things about when Arnold Schwarzenegger, I just heard that he didn't know how to balance the budget. So he'd only been governor for a month when a regular $20, $25 car registration, he decided to use that to balance the entire state budget, which he said, so it went from $25 to $700 in a month for the average small car to get registered. And he had a month to prepare if your registration was due in a month after this bill had passed. So he was draconian in a lot of ways because he didn't have any experience, and he was very conservative in his way, at least that my way, the highway, literally, because no one could afford to be on the highway anymore. But in this time period, there were other things. He cut school budgets like in crazy ways, because the thing is if you can stop a kid from getting expelled, and it costs $7,000 a day in 1998 to school a high school student here in the capital city, and in Los Angeles it's more. Sacramento School District just got taken over by the state because the state said, well, your budget's increased to $11,000 a kid, and you're getting horrible. These kids are dropping out. There's fights every day. You can't manage anything. You're not managing teachers or school, and the records department is absolutely broken. So what do we need to do? We'll take you over if we have any more problems. Once you need more money, if you ask us for more money and your rates keep showing everything is broken, we're not going to give you more money. We're going to take over your entire school district. Well, that is at $11,000 a kid. So if you expel 100 kids, in a lot of the middle schools back in the 90s, that was the rate, about 100 to 300 at a big school, depending on the neighborhoods and the communities. You had 900 kids in districts being expelled in the height of the 90s, mid-90s, 95, 96. So zero tolerance meant that a lot of kids, especially black and brown kids and people from working class families from all backgrounds, every different race, color, creed, showing high rates of getting expelled between 8th grade and 9th grade, and they would end up in jail within 2-3 years. And most of the time when they got into juvenile hall or ended up expelled from between 8th grade and 10th and 9th grade, these students were not getting back into school, and were not getting and that was almost like within the next 2 years they were in jail. They were incarcerated somehow, and then once they're in the system, it's almost impossible, it seemed, for people to get out. One thing that we noticed was if you can stop 100 kids from getting expelled at $11,000 a student, how much money is that for the school district? So if you're getting paid even $7,000, let's say, and you can stop 50 kids from being expelled, is your school district doing better or worse? Or your teachers going to be fired or hired? It's definitely a cost analysis. Now look at the 300 students getting expelled. When we instituted the program of conflict mediation, it cost $4,000 to train 20 kids in 8th grade to stop these expulsions. It worked so well right away, immediately, overnight. After 2 days of training that cost the teacher Saturday and Sunday pay, took the kids paid for lunch for the kids, and that's it. So it was they paid her wage, and then they paid maybe for some training materials, some paper, some books that Xeroxed, and lunch for all these kids, for 20 kids for 2 days, catered. Hey, long story short, it cost them less than $3,000 to save. At about then, it was about $6,000 in 1994, maybe 1993, for each child who gets expelled. That all that money is out of the district, and most of it goes down to like 25% of that, even if they go to an independent study or continue at school. So the district loses money and loses jobs, and these kids some of them lose everything. After they get kicked out of school, sometimes there's just it just keeps dragging them into this prison pipeline. But the fact is, when Arnold Schwarzenegger cut those programs, he might have saved $2,000 a year, and then the schools just rapidly decline in a way that if you're expelling 900 kids a year in high schools, and another 300 in middle schools, and they never get to come back to that school, and sometimes they just end up in the continuation study or just dropping out. How much money is that going to take? So if we put back the 2,000, or today's money, there's more issues, and we add in the fact that, well, if we combine conflict mediation in corporate areas, so in businesses and jobs, and in schools, and in other places, like how a mall can benefit from this to save lives, and how churches and other things can save lives by helping the community to stop this massive amount of violence. And it only costs you a couple $1,000s to hire someone to train the people who can put together the mediators. Because the fact is it takes a peer. In schools and in hospitals and things like that, you need someone who knows the staff, but is sensitive and is not as judgmental as a lot of the places. Not everybody's made out is going to be able to do this work. But if 8th graders could do it and save lives, and we're talking $900,000. It's, at some schools, that's how much they saved within 6 months. And it cost the school or the corporate center or the hospital or any job site only $4,000 to save $900,000. It doesn't actually make sense to say no. And the fact is you're saving life after life after life after life. And you're offering people solutions before they end up having the lowest rates of success possible to get out of all these different kinds of areas that the violence either is drawing them near or is the problem that's causing their anger and their frustration and their conflicts. So when you think about all this conflict, think about all the violence, and then think about the amount of investing in an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But at this rate, it's more like a gram of prevention is worth 100 pounds of cure. Because the fact is we're living in a world that when I was a kid, they had, I think the first mass shooting in the United States, I believe, was in 1991. Now it's a daily event you hear on news. And that is with the amount of stress that we're dealing with. No one thought there was going to be a pandemic in our lifetime. Not that I know I didn't. In the medical field, they talked about there could be. And this is what we need to start doing to stop the future of if a pandemic raises its head. We've had Zika, now measles, we've had coronavirus, and the amount of stress that people are under due to the housing crisis in California. In addition to the job, there's like 75 million people out of work who were almost all fired in the same day. You've got numerous industries that people don't know how they're going to come back, with a vaccine or not. They don't know when music's going to come back. They don't know when movies are going to come back in theaters. They don't know when people are going to be safe in any of those environments. They don't know when these variants that they don't think vaccines can all prevent tomorrow are going to stop everything. So if we're not living in a new world today than we had a year and a half ago, then we need to start thinking about new solutions. And if what happened prior to the housing crisis, all added up to 6 out of 10 people graduating, but we've had a month after I moved back in 2012, we had a month later a 13% sudden change in higher wages in the entire region I was in. And the place I left had a 25% crime increase at the very same time that since has been really hard. They both have worked on both. There's been higher wages brought in California, and there's been less crime in the area where I left in Philadelphia. But we're still dealing with, these are preventable. Violence is a preventable disease. You've got a lot of things that can be prevented now with 5 minutes. And when I think about how it took 5 minutes and 10 minutes total for me to stop 2 people from making the biggest mistake of their lives and taking the lives of 300 employees and plus another 50 potentially, including mine. So that would be 352. And if I hadn't made it through the first one, I wouldn't have made it through the second. So it took me 5 minutes that day to change their minds with my experience. Maybe, definitely. But a lot of people say, well, I might not have known what to say or said it because I would have been too scared. I wouldn't have known what to do. But the fact is, once we started training me at 14 years old and 13 years old, that by the time I was 15, I was really good at it. And then I saw a big change. But it also makes the peer counselors feel better because you're seeing the benefits of everything in your own life. You can go out there and you're stopping cycles of violence around you. Suddenly you're empowered to do a whole lot of things. And when I ended up in medicine and, I sadly, a boss had ended up who later got fired for this, but, her husband who owned the company had to fire her eventually because of this decision. Took 30% of their leadership team, the main investors of the company's retirement overnight, when she said that because I had made a complaint and expected results, that a colleague of mine had been attacked in a race manner that was illegal, that was doing a great job. They were doing a good job, and the employee who happened to be a minority too, but the person that insulted them was doing a very bad job at their job, facts aside, because the boss's wife, who was later fired for this, or the company owner's wife, my boss, said that I was being sensitive. I said, well, no, I know I'm right, because I'm the one who, changed your whole department from being one that was failing to one that is, my wall is studded with awards for doing a good job here. But what I don't realize is why you're rewarding bad behavior and people who are doing badly and expecting different results. Because I'm going to quit, put my 2 weeks notice in now, and I'm not being sensitive. I'm doing the right thing. And my work, it says that doing the right thing every day, I may not get paid as much as you, but it does have benefits and rewards that I'm not willing to give up right now. So I'm going to put my notice in. And I do remember in the next 2 weeks being begged by the biggest investors in the job that worked there every day, because it was publicly traded, this company. They begged me to stay. At least half of the employees there, maybe 80% of the teams that were the biggest investors and had walked the longest, said, please don't go. And I said, if you knew why I was leaving, you would understand. But when 2 weeks after I left, they had a 30% decrease on all of their stock portfolio was slashed almost in half. And they couldn't get it back. Everyone just freaked out. That was when it was, what did you do? Why did she leave? And within 6 months, they couldn't even get a 10%. They couldn't get it to rebound even 10%. So they ended up firing the 200,000 year salaried wife of the company's owner then, after 6 months. And I'd been replaced then by 10 people who had quit. They eventually took all these, being a woman of color, they took took my one job and multiplied that salary with all of the increases. These were all women who'd been there longer than me, from 4 different departments, but everyone was a woman of color. So at least there was the fact that while I had to leave and I missed that job very much, I loved it. It took 6 people who all made more money than me every year, salaried, to replace me, and 17 total with 10 people who quit. When they replaced my one position with 6 people who all were sensitive to the needs of people of color, and most of our clientele and the people that I served every day weren't. But they were definitely the smallest minority in this business, in this company. But they all got jobs. They all got, it was seen that it took 6 people to do my job after 17 people said no, of all different backgrounds. And to be someone of my specific, they started thinking somebody who understands what it's like to be in her shoes every day. Let's see if that works. They eventually got a 15% rebound on that stock, but that other 15% never came back within a year to a year and a half. I know because I own stock as well. It was with a publicly traded company, a lot of employees are almost always allowed to buy stock there. So I bought stock, and it took me about 5 years to start seeing some, more stable. It was more stable after a few years, but the sad thing is that it took at least $15 billion of losses in retirement for going back 25 years, 30 years, for people to learn to respect that decision that my boss made. That cost her job, her reputation, and impacted the retirements of at least, we're talking hundreds of people, probably about 400 people total, including all the international people who work there. And it also impacted the business in every way, every single way. Because when you're losing 30% of your stock because of one person, it's a bad decision. And the person you lose now, you've got to pay not just the $15 billion, it was also all those 6 people that replaced me, the 10 people that quit because they couldn't do the job with that. They said, you're expecting too much of us, we can't get it. We can't do this. The gap that I left, I have to remind myself these days, it's been over 15 years since that job, since that decision I made to walk. But they never learned anything. It was painful, but they learned to listen. People learn that division is bad for business. And now that I'm a small business owner who's had my business completely rearranged and destroyed by, hopefully temporarily, I don't know. But with Corona, it's changed everything for me. As a music, someone who runs 2 small music businesses. But I hire, I've had to fire a few doctors because of the coronavirus, not because they were too retired, but because of their insensitivity towards other people during this time. One of them is a teacher of medicine, and the other one is a anesthesiologist. But because of their insensitivity towards other human beings came out during this time, I decided to make a decision to let them both go to doctors, and that I was employed. And then I've had my DJ businesses, where it might be the first to rebound during this. It might also be, at least of my 2 businesses, it's the one that's easier to come back than concerts. Concerts is, as a band manager, singer-songwriter, and a booking agent for my own business, it's really hard to ever imagine how it's going to be the same again. So now I have to look I'm going to go back to school, so that I can get into a career that is not one of the last to come back after something happens that changes the world overnight, but something that gets ahead of things and provides a better world for me, and that is one of the first places one of the last to leave and the first places to open back up. So, I can go to school online, and that's what made me think about the violence. I said, well, when people go back to work, I don't want it to go back to the way it was, where people were showing up every day on the news. There was a shooting. Because I remember thinking, how many times, every time I see it, I think, how could someone have stopped that? Like, not stopped it physically. The 5 minutes that I spoke to these 2 employees who were going to make the worst decisions in their lives and potentially take the lives of a lot of other people, or just they could make you paralyzed for the rest of your life, one gunshot. How did I do that? And they said, they both implied that the reason that they stopped, first of all, was that someone cared, and that it was someone who didn't just care, wasn't just saying, I care now, please stop, to save me, or save anyone else, or please to save you. It was someone who treated them with respect and a bit of sensitivity every single day. And one thing I was known for in all my hospital work as a communication specialist was that I might hear 400 or 500 people's voices a day, and then later 5,000 or 7,000 voices a day. But I could identify the voices of at least up to 500 people that I would talk to regularly. I might only talk to you once a week or once a day, but I would remember the voices of about 500 people instantly. Hey, how are you doing? And I would know your name. Hey, how are you? And I'd just say your name. What's up, Meredith? What's up, Paul? Hey, what's up, Dr. Burstein? How are you doing? What's up? I'd say, how are you doing today? In a professional manner, but being a musician and listening and being sensitive and caring about people is how I ended up with a 4-year scholarship to medical school as well. And, so now I've kind of thought about, as being in music, I had to deal with not all this break from Corona has taught me that I really need to keep moving and use my intellect for more. And the experience in music is, I've gotten jaded, even though I became a music teacher, got a mayor's commendation for my teaching work in Philadelphia, and managed to really help to increase the confidence of girls ages 7 to 19, and some with very severe special needs, some very severely disabled children. And the people with the disabilities had probably the biggest miraculous turnarounds, and allowed me to see that I could be empowered to do things to help other people that I had no idea that my hands could be blessed to help. Like, I developed in 8 weeks a vocal therapy for a partially paralyzed girl who had been almost killed by a drunk driver. When she came home walking down the street with her friends on Christmas Eve, she was struck by a drunk driver and injured so gravely that she had had 19, by the time I met her, she had had 19, I'll nickname her Phoenix. By the time I met Phoenix, she had 19 brain surgeries and only was able to say clearly one sort of word, and that was ha, ha. And then by the end of our 8 weeks, at 2 hours to 1 hour twice a week of this therapy that I created using her favorite music, which was the Beatles, and very much thinking about her crush on John Lennon, she went from saying ha in the 5 years and 19 brain surgeries to singing your love lifted me higher, 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 and having learned let it be, let it be, let it be, speaking words of wisdom, let it be, and a number of other Beatles tunes. And that was 2 hours, 1 hour actually twice a week, spent starting with small victories that led to the really big ones towards the end of that 8 weeks, and working with her caretaker and her family members that she lived with. She was able to get her voice and impact a number of other patient, quality of life issues, that empowered her to say, I'm choking. So empowered her to say, someone help me. Empowered her to say, I love you to her mother and her family members who took care of her, and to tell her nurses that she cared, to having a relationship in her disabled class. She got a boyfriend. But the craziest part and the most mind-blowing part of it is that this partially paralyzed child who'd had 19 brain surgeries was singing like a bird in only 2 hours invested over 8 weeks. That's 16 hours of work. And she got up and walked, so the amount of brains, there's spiritual things. Both her caretakers were pastors that were family, and then she had a nurse that came in every day or every other day. Every day, about half the day, she had the nurse, and then she had her family members who took care of her there. Phoenix was cared by two pastors who were a married man and wife. And when they told me she got up and walked, she took a step, maybe two steps. And the fact that she was standing up, her doctors were crying. I heard, and I cried and started jumping for joy because, it was a miracle that she could speak again. But I just said, well, she did the work. And she did the work to get up there and walk. She did the work to get a relationship. She did the work to act very active in her disabled school. But after 19 brain surgeries, there's other scientific data that says using her favorite music and her being motivated by how much she loved John Lennon as a crush, it stimulated things in her past, that she used to be a singer, and they showed me videos of her singing. So I had some idea of what she would sing along to and what she was motivated by, and used all of that to find a way to try to impact her life. And it probably took 6 hours to develop the ideas that led to the turnaround in the 8 weeks. But each class, I take notes and base my next lesson, improvements on each week. Each hour led to the next hour being improved, and the next week being improved, and using her. It's been a week and she's talking. She's saying more words than the only one she said in 5 years. So let's go from there to keep making progress and not push her too hard, and encourage her. And what she did, it was miraculous in her vocals, and it empowered her in her future to be able to stop her from choking, help her swallow her food, help her to communicate with the outside world in friendship and love and family, everything. But the fact is that her traumatic brain injury, that people always said to me with my patient Phoenix, that her traumatic brain injury patients, and that I've seen in the past this too, tend to have, when they're in pain or all the time, if they survive, they still have a kind of a chip on their shoulder, people will say. The doctors will say, it's part of what happens with traumatic brain injury. It'll put you in a bad mood. Like people say, concussion, now, since in the last 20 years, they know that post-concussion syndrome can make you very irritable as it heals. As broken noses heal, same thing. A broken nose and skull fractures can give you a real chip on your shoulder. That's what doctors will tell you. Because your brain has been through a lot of trauma and it's trying to heal, and the brain itself is being impacted. And traumatic brain injury persons who worked with me when I was managing like a skate shop once, I had one employee who had traumatic brain injury, and once in a while he'd just have a chip on his shoulder. He'd be having a bad day. But, he would, an hour from now, he could change that, especially if he knew what he had. and you help to work with it, stay positive. He would be positively inspired by someone else, not responding to his issue with TMJ, with traumatic brain injury. So, but hers, she's always been, even after 19 surgeries and this massive injuries to her head and spine and body, she'd always been just a living angel, living, just smiling, happy, just the happiest person, the happiest traumatic brain injury person I've ever heard of. And that positivity made it easy to find out more, to work with her. It made it very easy. But she's just a wonderful person to be around. You see her singing before the accident, and she's captivating everyone. And now, after 8 weeks, she's captivating everybody. She's making miracles happen. But she's also showing that she taught me a lot about forgiveness, because that only reason I wasn't teaching full time as a girls rock instructor, the most popular girls rock instructor in Philly at that time, and had gotten offered this job to work with this young lady with special needs, instead, was because I was recovering from having been almost murdered with my son, where we were both tortured and I was almost killed in a home invasion by a stalker who was a musician named, in the music, in ska music and in reggae music. Where he was a ska musician and I did both. And this guy had broken in our house and attacked me and my child, and I barely survived, and along with my son. But we were trying to kind of recover from that. And this child taught me a lot about forgiveness. I remember when the last time I got to work with her, before I moved away from the East Coast, I gave her this wooden box that had engraved on it, and had an inscription of a paragraph about forgiveness. And it just said forgiveness. And I gave it to her, and it was just made out of like a fine wood or mahogany or cherry wood, and finished, and I just told her, and today I still think about it. I need to work more on, I say don't look back unless it's going to help you move forward. In some ways, when you've suffered through, if you suffered from recovery from torture and recovery from a massive amount of violent situations and trauma, and you see someone who's been through a lot of those same things, or things that are even worse, and they are more positive. They're not being held back by something that happened in the past. And you see that they made a choice, and they've been blessed to inspire others through their survival and their experience of rising above victimhood to become a survivor and to live in survivorship, or survivorhood, as I call it. But she made me realize that if you constantly are dwelling on the past, you're not moving forward with what you can do for tomorrow. So with this program, it allows me an opportunity to say I can train other people, to both support my ability to be consulting more places and help more people, to train other people to basically make it almost like a healing army of people using their humanity, their the belief in human resilience, and their own just joy of saying something good come out of something. And there's just every different justification for helping to move forward. But it also will make it so I can move forward as a professor. I can become a professor and get through my PhD and master's. But at the same time, it's been really hard to move past, well, what if vocal therapy and passing on this vocal therapy is the best thing I should do? That's our law school, So now I'm thinking about law school, and this is part of my way of making that happen. And at the same time, making myself empowered enough to want to continue to reach for those goals. Because what I realized since my son, became an adult, moved on, and started moving through college, as soon as I saw the date coming where being a mom who runs a small business wasn't going to be enough to take me, to keep me focused on the positive, I guess, or moving forward, I started to really freak out. I've been his homeroom mom in second grade, and I was the reader at 3 hours a day in some of his schools in kindergarten. And then later on, it was like junior tennis coach, a very overzealous, bad baseball mom of someone who immediately told me he hates baseball. I was like, to junior tennis coach, and then a girls rock instructor, and who was running her own band, and leaving the most popular band in the city of Philadelphia, in the fifth largest city, and then turned down vice president jobs, turned down law school where I was personally going to be mentored by the new district attorney then of Philadelphia, Bob Foster. But I still got a commendation from the mayor for what I did with girls that summer. I remember I was coming in to quit my job, a job that coincidentally I had 10 years before that dreamed of having my own company like the one I was working in 5 hours a day at that time. I just started this job, got off Craigslist, went in there for the interview, got the job, and I'd been there about 2 weeks when I came in to quit. And this was because, there's a number of things going on, but I had to volunteer with the girls, dealing with recovering from a serious trauma that had happened, and then I was going to have to go testify in my own case, and I ended up walking away from a lot of things. About to walk away from the girls' camp, turned down testifying in this trial, and then was just basically just drinking myself into early grave the whole week, just not wanting to do a lot of things, just dealing with my own trauma and, dealing with the effects of just dealing with what trauma is like. And that's without any injuries to my brain or head at the time, But the fact is that I just was giving up. And I had this new job. So I had this new job where I was offered the VP job. He said, I want to make you vice president. And I said, I'm here to quit. So after having one of the worst weeks in my history of my life in Philadelphia, I turned down the VP job the same day because I said, I'm here to quit. I'm totally dead set on quitting. I look back and, that was in 2011. I look back and I'm like, why would I quit when I had a vice president job and I only worked 5 hours a day? I just went from the bottom of customer service care person to vice president, and I just gave up. So part of me looks at, what can I learn as I'm moving forward in my life is like confidence. Without confidence in the race of life, they say in reggae and from Jamaica, you're twice defeated. Because in the race of life, you have one life to live. And if you're down on yourself and you don't believe in you, no one else will. But Jamaica, you have a lot of people I work with that come from a third world country. Some of their only educations for a lot of people in Jamaica who come from the reggae community they had one book in their house in their entire lives. It was a Bible. And their entire education had came from learning how to read through that Bible and practicing, learning from their culture and learning from their experiences. And they've toured the world. One of my bosses actually met his bandmates in the polio orphanage back in Jamaica, when the three of them all were in the polio orphanage. And then they are now one of the most famous bands that have ever existed in the history of the world and had some of the longest careers in the world. But he would always tell me, he took me to South America on tour in, I think, 1999, 2000. And he would just prove that as he danced like the angels, the guy danced like he would, with his cane and with his disability and with his having had horrible polio, almost kill him as a child. He danced around the world until the day he passed away, which he had a long, long life. But, you can't see that experience and say that person, what excuse do you have to not get the most out of life when that is somebody that person is your boss? They're paying everybody here. The whole big stage at the beach in Lima, Peru, that got me my expedited passport and got me, I had my own cheering section, 1,500 kids out of the 15,000 people in Peru that were in front of me. And they got me out there, paid for our passport, paid for our $2,000 plane ticket round trip, four-star hotels, a whole security team for each and every person, including all the singers especially. So all the singers had their own personal security team. And all of this was brought about by someone who wasn't just going to let death take them. But when they overcame death, they overcame disability, they overcame being in a third world country, having all the odds that living in a place where polio was rampant in the 60s and 50s, to being unstoppable and having a better experience than almost anyone I ever knew at that time in my life. I didn't know anyone who took themselves around the world, paid a whole bunch of people, and didn't make excuses about their disabilities. And didn't say, I'm disabled, so I should just give up. Or I should let other people define what I can do. And that experience did help with what I've been able to do with girls in education, with music, and also to survive some things that were probably, hard to survive. Because a lot of time I'd say people try to pretend there's no torture in America, but the person who first got me started in torture recovery, Shoshana Garfield, her entire family was, she is now a psychiatrist full-time around the world who helps people with torture recovery from all these different countries and all these different places because she survived her parents' being in a sex cult in the United States. And that's how she, experienced torture. But since has not just recovered, but she helps people recover every day. And it is something you have to keep working at. And I guess that because of the experience I had with trauma and recovery and seeing people who don't make excuses, who come from the absolute most smallest income amounts in the world, with some of the harshest conditions of life in the world, surrounded by things like violence and drugs and disease that aren't being treated, or is easy to get treated. And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in their income to get an education in elementary school, not to mention college and all those things. Now, if Apple Gabriel of Israel Vibrations, the guy who first hired me in reggae, didn't make excuses and ended up hiring people and giving us 4-star hotel rooms and paying for all of these things that his label took care of. And he met his bandmates in a polio orphanage. And this is what he did when he decided he wanted to leave the band, and start his own thing. But he changed the lives of my life. He changed a lot of the people around me's lives. But he didn't make any excuses. I guess I'll just be an orphan who has polio for the rest of my life. That he didn't make any excuses in a third world country where everything he had was already altered from the next, perfectly healthy person in the first world country might have had. But even with disabilities, even with every different obstacle stopping him, he was traveling the entire world doing his music, his way, with people he had chosen to work with. And he wasn't worried about anything, if he is, I want to make sure this show is perfect. I want to make sure to do the best show we can. And I'm going to have a good time doing it. And just seeing that we're not perfect people, we're human beings. But that is the power of humanity, the power of human resilience. And having been able to work with all these different people, showing me that I definitely could do more, especially looking at the life of the music industry and how it's declined as far as pay and as far as ease of being able to work within it for the rest of your life, or do it as a hobby or do it as a profession, whichever way you do it. Things are changing every day now. And that was before coronavirus. Now it's changing even more drastically than I've ever seen it in my entire life. Never seen it change so fast overnight. So I just want to look into the future in a way that I can have a better future. And then I can also, come on, little moth. I can also, do what I'm best at, which is find a new way to help people, or find a better way that I can help people, and at the same time provide myself with a better life that's more rewarding and more fulfilling than the one I had before this virus hit. And not keep wasting talents, wasting time, wasting potential on something that didn't keep Apple Gabriel down and shouldn't keep me down. So instead of saying disabled, I like to think of this as differently abled. But that patient Phoenix, she altered my existence and taught me that, is it really worth, if you can't change the past, and if trying to change the past is going to make your future worse, or the future of everyone else worse, shouldn't you really only look back to try to move forward or to try to make things better in any way? Because sometimes I can get caught up in the past that are in fear, and in low self-esteem, or in past traumas, and just not be satisfied or fulfilled in my life, and hold myself back from things I could be doing to help impact the lives of people around me. But what I've noticed, just being able to look at my own experience right now and what I'm going to do tomorrow, is the Jamaican community that I've seen go from living in what people here might think is, it's a third world country, it's got a lot of problems, to being more inspiring, more enduring, being the most well-known form of music to survive every bad thing that's happened in the music industry for the last 50 or 70 years, and changed the world through inspiring people in every country in the world that allows them to perform. And if they don't, they inspired them through their own music. And that got through the radio, and then got through the internet, and got through record labels to those people in those places, from the deserts of the entire world and to every language of the world. They have not let anything stop them. And those are the people that taught me, my preferred form of art, which is reggae music, and gave me the gift of being able to learn from their experience every day before I learned how to manage my own bands. And then there's still the music that I choose to do is reggae. And I happen to be a spiritually, what they call like a Rastafarian Christian or whatever. But I also, all those things aside, those don't make me who I all am. Those are ways I express myself and my spirituality. But their endurance, their parables, like Jamaicans say things like, don't chat to stranger, don't tell all your business to somebody you don't know. They say things like, the race of life is not for the swift. It is for those who can endure. So keep moving forward. They say things like, don't let your head fly like a fowl with a feather, or don't let your head go this way and that like you're flying through the sky in different directions, because it's not healthy. Is basically how it translates into English. But in patois, these are things that guide people, help them survive in a place where just to get an elementary school education, you have to provide over $200,000 a month in Jamaican currency, which in America, it adds up to be at least $50,000 a year, $20,000 to $50,000 a year, just to get one child in education. And, I've seen people from that background do everything they wanted to do in their lives, anywhere they wanted to do it, based on just their own will and their spirituality and their experience and their will to survive, their resilience, their ability to overcome every odd that people here in the first world country, having lived in Germany and in the United States, people make excuses every day, saying that a million opportunities that they have are not really the opportunities for them, or that they've given up based on X, Y, B, or C. Like, I'm disabled, I'm this, I'm that, or this is what I'm dealing with today, and that's why I can't do what I want, or live my dreams, or escape my reality in my own mind, because really what they've shown me is that what's in your mind is so powerful. So if a lot of the things going around us today, there's a lot of reasons for why there's so much violence in the society around me. But having been a victim of, being tortured by someone else's mental illness, as in the ska musician who, as a sociopath, had found a way to commit all these crimes and then when he saw me perform, I became a victim of his guy. Now that I've studied multiple martial arts styles, won a few MMA matches, and, worked really hard to get me to help me and my child who experienced this brutal crime, to recover from that. What more can I continue to do now that my son has moved on to college and I have, and I don't want to be a DJ full time and run a band full time forever, and I don't want to necessarily make that what's going to put all the food on the table. I don't want it to be my full-time job forever. So I'd like to do music as a hobby and get back more into healing. And I had to look at what I did with the vocal therapy, what I did with teaching, and that made me go from the new teacher at school to mandatory classes after my first, I created a program. I wrote my own syllabus, and I designed my program, my workshop, and it went from an elective to mandatory pretty much overnight. So after my first class, they made it mandatory for the whole school to take it. And then I was voted most popular and then given the commendation from Mayor Michael Nutter in 2010. What made those girls like the way I worked? It's not so much about, are you a special little snowflake, or, what are you? I'm a human being just like everyone else. But the experience I had working directly with Jamaican artists who didn't make excuses for things to stop their dreams from coming true, and who live longer lives and healthier lives, regardless of their background and having this medical cause, having this access to medicine, education, all these things. We're living longer, living healthier with less health issues than most of the people I know in a first world country who have access to insurance, medicine, the best hospitals money can provide, and have almost nothing out of reach if they really want it bad enough. But these Jamaicans don't have those. They didn't have any of those things. And they're living longer, they're healthier, and they're living their dreams in a way that I've never seen anyone around me live their dreams before. And they didn't make excuses. That was one of the number one things I've seen. They don't say, this is the reason why. Today or yesterday or something that happened or who I am or who people tell me I should be, that defines everything I am and who I'm going to be and what I'm going to do forever until I'm dead. And I'm going to be sick because this has happened. And I'm going to be old because this happened. I'm going to die young because of this, that, and third. But around me, I see that a lot in my hometown. And you saw in Germany, I remember people would say, well, this is the history of Germany as I got older. But when I lived there, it had completely changed from what I saw, what I'd heard the history was when I got older. Because I came back to the United States from Germany as a kid after traveling with the Air Force there, speaking fluent German. And my son today speaks German, Japanese, I speak, and English. And with honors proficiency since the third grade, he's been at a fifth or sixth grade reading level since he was in second or third grade. And he's been learning Spanish since kindergarten. And I myself speak Spanish, Hebrew, German, and I'm now learning Vietnamese and French. But I started with German and English in kindergarten as well. So, but being around a lot of different cultures, you learn a lot of different things about how humans work, how they're surviving, what makes each culture different, and that every human being has their own. We all cultures, all regions, all nations, all people have struggles, but struggles. What Frederick Douglass has taught me, in his famous quote, "Without struggle, there's no progress." The further part of the quote, a lot of people haven't heard, is that he says people want the changes without the roaring tide and the turbulent ocean that bring about that change. They want what comes from the sea. They want the fish without the waves. But without struggle, there is no progress. Because power concedes nothing without making a demand. It never has, he said, and it never will. It will be physical, or it will be material, or it could be theoretical. Whatever that change is, or whatever that demand is, that physical, material demand, or even just a philosophical demand, that demand will always exist. And as long as you are making progress through your struggles, then you are attaining a change. And the more I think about that is from a man who bought his way out of slavery and ended up being the very first published, first-person account of what it was like to be a slave. And this is the wisdom that he's come out to become an author, a published author worldwide, and whose book is still impacting my life today, in 2020. But Frederick Douglass, his experience was, did he make excuses while he was in slavery? That I have to stay a slave forever. In a world where many people did die slaves, and their generations after them never attained their freedom, or didn't attain it easily, or didn't attain it in a way that today would feel like freedom. But when he did attain his freedom, did he really feel free? Because if everyone isn't free, some people say, then am I really free? Until we're all free, am I really free? So until we're all free, are we free? Are you free? Am I free? Because we're not in chains right now? If we're all living in a society built on the fact that everyone who looks like me is in chains. But the fact is that he didn't make any excuses at all for what his life became. He's an internationally known author who started his life in chains. And his choices, people say, you had choiceless choices. And I've been through parts in my life where that's all I had. But as soon as I got the chance to make a choice, I started making those choices to move forward. And at age 4, I taught myself how to read with a set that I'd been gifted by my great aunt, that she may have assumed someone else would teach me how to use the Hooked on Phonics set that I got when I was 4. But by the time I was 4.5, I was a reader. Because I learned how to use a cassette tape, and because I learned how to read, use those books, and 3 weeks later I knew how to read. So in by 6 months I was a really avid reader. By a year later I had read 100 books almost, or science manuals, and this was all before they started teaching reading to kids my age in school and before I went to kindergarten. But now I get to see today, every day I see lots of ways where that impacted my life, where becoming an early reader has been great for me, and my love of reading could carry me forward. So I'm kind of working on things and trying not to make excuses for why I can't do this or can't do that, or need a degree to do this, or need a master's degree to do that, or be a PhD. And also the best way to plan my future and make choices about the future today. And I wrote a song earlier today that said, that got me in this whole train of thought. It was, today might hate on you, but tomorrow loves you. So don't give up. Let today be jealous of all your tomorrows. And don't give up now. And remember, tomorrow always loves you. Because, Jamaicans inspire me with a Jamaican artist named Gappy Ranks, who comes to Northern California sometimes, inspired me with a song that called Tomorrow Loves You. And it was one of his earliest numbers, his earliest published reggae tunes in the international scene of reggae. But he is one of the most successful artists, I'd say, today, and one with the biggest. He officially, besides maybe Bob Marley, and Bob Marley and him are probably he's got way more songs than almost any other artist I've ever heard of. He puts out an amazing amount of work, and he's traveled to this city and also to the East Coast of the United States, and he's known in every major reggae loving city in the world right now, I'd say. From Jamaica to Germany to the United States to the entire Caribbean and South America, everybody knows who this guy is by now. But his work has come so far, and then his work has started out really, really at an extremely high level. And it just says that he has a lot of standards for himself, coming from Jamaica to where he lives in the United Kingdom, and coming to where I live. He hasn't let anything stop him. And I just look forward to what he's going to do next. But that song, that gift he gave us with Tomorrow Loves You, inspired this song tonight, and my experiences, that made me want to sing the song. And then also all this past week, I've been thinking about how to use what happened at those 2 traumatic, potentially deadly situations where I was confronted with someone who was going to commit the worst mistake of their lives and could have taken my life and everyone I worked with because of that mistake they were going to make. And what made it 5 minutes talking to them, what made them stop making that choice and be willing to face up to the consequences of what almost doing that meant, and the things that led to them wanting to do these horrible acts of potential violence that were stopped right then when they decided to do something different. What could I do and learn from it? And could I make that help other people? And could I teach them why they could, or could I help empower them to see that all we really need is to start looking at how to change these things, and what's the easiest way to get it started, and how to keep spreading that healing and that positivity and that help in a non-judgmental manner, to where I can impact more lives than just what I'm going to be able to do as a teacher or as a professor. And tomorrow, what can I do today to increase my better tomorrow, to make a better tomorrow for my life, my family, my experience in this life, and from my experiences in the past? What can I do about that? Should I just sit around here and not teach? That wasn't my option before. I taught because I loved it. I believed I could do it. I've seen other people do it. Why can't I do it? Sure, I'll do it. I'll take the job. In the beginning, it was just, yeah, sure, I loved to volunteer. And I was doing small community volunteer work then, and I got to help more kids, and I got to help some severely, marginalized women in the music industry. We're like 1% in DJing are women, and where my music is as a DJ is successful, and my business, there's 1% of us are women. But in bands, it's maybe at the most in some cities 5% women, or maybe 10% at the most. In a city with lots of progression, you'll see maybe 10% of the musicians are women, and they're still limited to very few fields. So having experienced that for a long time, I want to move forward in my life, and helping people motivates me past disabilities or different abilities, motivates me past negativity, motivates me to get off my butt when I don't. My will, my spirit, or my will doesn't want to get up and go out the door. And the love that I feel of other people, seeing what they can do with just a little encouragement or a little education passed on to them. I always tell the girls, you teach us teachers, us musical teachers that are musicians, you teach us more than we probably teach you. But we're just passing on the torch so that you can take what we've got and make it bigger. Because none of us want to be where music was 20 years ago. And none of us want to be where it is 100 years ago. But your tomorrow will be greater than today. Today will be way jealous of your tomorrows. That's what I hope. I'm starting with, you guys teach us more than you think. You teach us more than we probably teach you. But the jadedness factor, that's a joke that we tell, the International Jadedness Musician Factors, we call it, the IJM. Whenever you start camp, most girls say their IJM is like a 12 or 19, these teachers in the music industry. But after a week at camp, you're down to like a -0, like a -9 IJM, We call it the factor to measure jadedness amongst our professional musicians. And I can tell you, working with one differently abled Phoenix, the child I call Phoenix, the young lady, for 8 weeks, and working with people from what people in America call third world country with a lot of problems, taught me more to not make excuses, to not let yesterday's pain and yesterday's trauma and yesterday's regrets and yesterday's grudges get into the way of tomorrow and make excuses for why I don't live a better life, why I'm not happy, why I would make excuses and spread negativity to others or my family or anyone in the society around me. And how all those things, excuses, taking someone else's belief and making it my own, I've seen mind over matter, spirituality, and positivity make so much of a difference that those other things, odds, against all odds, I've seen odds always disproven. Mind over matter beat, fact. This is what you can do, and this is what this society is capable of. Be completely opposite each other. That mind over matter wins over this is the way it is, and it's always going to be that way. And positivity win over negativity. No matter how bad the odds were, I've seen people with positivity defy everything in front of them until they're practically able to fly. Because they're flying around the world having started out music in a polio orphanage. And they live in the life of their dreams, not the life of what they were told as a child at a polio orphanage when they were this close to death, that they were going to have to live. And all those things say I can do more than I'm doing right now. I can do more than I did with music when this virus started out, changing my business. And I can do more than I was doing in maybe my whole life, looking forward if I use that kind of empowerment, that kind of mind over matter, unstoppable hope and optimism and hard work and resilience. If I start tapping into those things, rather than the negativity and the old other people's, mental status, how they feel, I should feel, and be mindful, choose how I'm going to feel, what I'm going to do with how I feel, and what I can do with what my mind is capable of rather than what people have always told me. Because I live in a world where most people don't teach themselves how to read and don't do it before kindergarten. But does that mean that we can't live in a world like that tomorrow? Does it mean that I'm doing the best I can right now then? Having been being convinced by negativity at some points in my life has made me able to jump past that once I shook off all that dirt, like Jay-Z would say in his song, get the dirt off your shoulder that's holding you back. And some days I really have to do it. Some days I have to spend weeks focused on getting dirt off my shoulder, let negativity hold me back. But the fact is, I'd say my higher power, my divine guidance in my life, I'd say God, has always gotten me past odds. And he's used my mind, my body, my spirit together to make it happen. When my body got up, it was because I had the will, but I didn't have the way. I was maimed for 3 years. I was in a wheelchair for 2. I have an incurable disease that but none of that kept me in a wheelchair forever. But being in a wheelchair got me so angry, and I hated it so much that I'm always telling people who are gracious in a wheelchair that, hey, let me get the door for you. And you're so gracious. I hated being in a wheelchair. I was a mess. But it got me to do where I can do headstands, yoga, dance, and had medical outcomes that they said were impossible before the wheelchair. So do I really believe this disease is incurable? No, I really don't. I've seen what I'm doing without a pain medicine at all, without, the physical therapy that I had to do. I did my own types of physical therapy, and I've been capable of 4 miles a day jogging, 5 days or 7 days a week, 2 years outside of a wheelchair. So I know for a fact that yoga and running could impact my life. And I got to impact the lives of others. But all these things I was told once by a doctor, you will never work full time again. So if you don't stop crying, I'm going to drop you as a patient. So I had to stop crying. But it didn't mean I stopped working on it. Once he said I couldn't do it, I started trying to find other ways to do it anyway. And I didn't bring it up at my doctor's appointments. All right. Yep, got to get to work.